Hello, I'm so glad you've joined us today. Our guest is a community health specialist at the Northeastern Family Institute in Massachusetts. Many of her clients are patients at a nearby state mental hospital, which she knows inside and out. She was a patient there for over 15 years. So please welcome to Christopher Close-Up, Marie Balter. Hello, Marie.
Hi, Father.
Glad you could be with us today.
I'm really pleased to be here.
I think people are trying to grasp what I just said, that you were a patient in the mental institution for 15 years and that now you're a mental health professional.
Right.
Before we talk about your present work, could you tell us a little about those earlier years?
Well, I guess I was caught up with the institution the same way as many young people are getting caught up now. I had had some problems within an adopted family and wound up depressed and suicidal at the age of 16, almost 17, and was hospitalized. And at that time, it was very easy to hospitalize people. It's not quite what like it is now.
I see.
And so I remained there, but I must say that I wasn't there constantly for 15 years. I was really in and out during almost 20 years, but it was the last, I'd say, close to 10 years that I was in without having come out.
I hope we have some teenagers listening to us, because the story of your process of growing toward health, as long as it took, was a gradual one, and it's a great lesson in hope that changes do occur. Tell me a little about a day in your life in those days back then when you were in an institution, just so that we can get a feeling for the institution, and then I'd like to move on and ask about how you changed and what happened.
Okay. I would say the institution was a day in the institution, I should say, was really a day of haven, being taken care of, not assuming any responsibility. There were those who took care of the patients there who were very kind, and there were those that were abusive. It was a day where you didn't make any major choices for your life. You didn't make the choice of what to eat, what time to go to bed, when to get up, even what books you would read, and so forth. I'd say what's sad about that was that if you do that to an adolescent, keep them within that environment over a long period of time, you start to decompensate even more. You become less motivated to pull your life together.
There is that tendency in all of us, isn't there, to try to climb back into the womb, or somehow to find a shelter that will free us from responsibility, where we can be protected and secure. I think all of us have that tendency and desire from time to time just to give up, and especially with young people when they don't know what the future holds, there's a fear of going on and breaking through.
I think the difference with, say, young people then, that was different, say, when I was in, or myself, or many of the young people that I lived with, I was in a culture, an Italian culture, in a community where it was very, very religious. And I think the strength that I could draw on when I made a decision that I wanted to get well was there. You know, the strength was there through my own faith in God, whereas I believe that a lot of young people haven't got that to draw on.
Yeah. You say you made a decision to start getting well, which means that for a long time you didn't make a decision to start getting well.
That's right.
Well, what
it
happened?
Begins with
How did that happen? How did you decide to start getting well? Did you say you hit bottom, that proverbial hitting bottom is supposed to be the occasion of it, or how would you describe it?
It's almost like you wind up in hell and you don't like it, so you decide to crawl out. I had gotten to a point where became very, very psychotic towards the last few years, and I lived, say, in a world that was not only chaotic but very scary. The faces I saw were monsters' faces. I was hallucinated and so forth, and I was uncomfortable.
And you actually knew that you could make the decision to crawl out of that?
I
Or you
hoped.
felt you could.
I began by saying, I don't like this world. Dear God, is it possible to climb out? I don't know. How do I if I want to climb out? And then all the tools, positive tools that I learned from being in the institution became tools for me to get well.
You know, there are a lot of people watching us right now from a hospital bed. And I know that they are listening to you in a deep way because sometimes it gets so bad that they don't think they'll ever pull out of it. But you're here to tell us that it's very possible.
Well, I've had the opportunity in my life to move from a world of hell to many very high peak moments in my life.
Mm-hmm.
I think God somehow guides each of us in the way that He wants us to. And I think our having the confidence in Him moves us more towards accepting that which is bad, but not using it in a negative way.
Mm-hmm.
I've developed a philosophy that I believe that pain and suffering doesn't have to be a negative force in your life. It can be very positive. And I don't say that because I am well, because I can say for myself at least that the times I was closest to God and felt the most strength and the most love from Him was when things were at their worst. That I just appreciated so much that I could go to somebody that could not fail me. You go to other human beings with their own weaknesses and so forth. Sometimes people will fail you,
Mm-hmm.
but He's always there, loving and caring and guiding. And especially when the tears come out of you that are desperate and a sense of despair, He can come into your life at that moment.
Do you think it was God who guided you to begin to work with mentally ill patients?
Well, there's a little story about how I came to the point of working with the mentally ill. I had been in the institution, and once I had made a decision to get well, I started doing some things physically, trying to get my strength back. I was down to 86 pounds. I think the first thing was beginning to eat.
Yeah.
It was as simple as that. But as I got a little better and I was able to go out on the grounds a little bit, the first day that I went out to the grounds, I went up to the chapel. And we have a beautiful chapel at Danvers State, and there was nobody there, and I walked down, and there was this big crucifix. And I was still in a state of desperation. I didn't know whether I was going to be successful.
Mm-hmm.
But I was putting out so much energy to get well that I was afraid that all that energy might not come to fruition. So I prayed. I went before that crucifix, and at that point I said, I begged God to give me the strength to do what I must to get well. I didn't really pray for any miracles. I believe in miracles, but I don't believe that was the way I was going to be guided, that in an instant I would be well. I asked Him to give me the strength to do the work that I must do to be well, and if I was successful, I would dedicate my life to serving His people. And I believe that God has the mentally ill in a special place in His own heart for all people. I remember from the gospel they say that he who is least shall be first, and he who seeks first shall be last. And they are the least. They're the most rejected. I think the mentally ill, particularly the chronic mentally ill, are those that fall at the bottom of the ladder, even more so than minority groups or, say, racial minorities. And I believe that He, is going to inspire this kind of work for the rest of my life to serve them.
Marie, it's a beautiful story, and I remember I called you before we invited you, and then I called you to find out more about you because I had read your story. And, on Christopher Close-Up, we're always hopeful that there will be someone who will give the spiritual dimension, but we never try to say to someone, please talk about God, because people can't do that. It's very hard for them sometimes. And I was wondering if in your story of recovery there was a spiritual strain, and now, of course, I assumed there was, but now I hear, as you fully explain it, that there's a very deep spiritual strain to your recovery. Now you're working among professionals. I mean, I should say, you are a professional working with clients or with people who are sick.
Right.
Can you tell us just a little about that work that you're doing now?
Well, about 2 years ago, I competed for some funding that there was some federal grant money coming down to the area. Actually, I should specify that I work in the eastern Middlesex area where we cover 5 cities and towns.
What state?
That's Wakefield, Reading, Melrose, Stoneham.
We're talking Massachusetts.
Right,
Okay.
in Massachusetts.
Okay.
And anyway, in competing for these programs, we came up with some unique services for the mentally ill. And I got, I think it was something like $750,000. And I have residential programs, day treatment programs, crisis intervention, a social drop-in for the homeless and the rejected.
Social drop-in?
Right.
Meaning?
It's a place where the people can come off the streets and have a place to go.
I see.
We serve meals in the evening, a hot meal, and it's very homey. There's a lot of activities go on. We have a marvelous group of young people on the staff. My directors are, I think they're the greatest. I won't tell them that when I go back, but I'll tell them now. That, you know, they are the greatest. They're,
How do you know when you've done a good job?
Well, I know because if I don't, my staff will be the first to let me know.
The people, too, probably feedback.
Right,
Huh?
right. I guess we know we're on the right track because we've seen some changes in some very, very chronically ill people.
Marie, are there any other helps that families and friends can turn to for support?
Unfortunately, each state is different in its in what they've done in programming. The families, I believe, can be supportive of the client, but it's very, very difficult for
Well, give me
them.
some ways in which the family can be supportive.
Well, I suppose one way is not to expect more from the client than what they're able to do. Sometimes we measure success of a client based on how productive they are.
Mm-hmm.
And with the kind of severely chronically disabled, sometimes it's the quality of their life. If we can do something to help that quality of life as opposed to measuring the success by productivity, I think that is the greatest help they can give.
To accept the fact that they're just not able to give very much. Is that what you're saying?
No, I'd say, because they can give an awful lot, I'd say that the road is very difficult and very long, and sometimes you may not see the success as far as, say, for instance, in a person like me. Not every client is going to go to Harvard or so forth or receive a doctorate and so forth, but sometimes just the fact that they've remained out of the hospital in a program and have gotten to the point where they've dressed themselves, where they can eat better food,
It's an
where they can make
extraordinary...
choices for themselves. That is success in itself.
That's an
And be
extraordinary
satisfied with
process.
that. Yeah.
And it takes a lot of patience. Marie, in about 15 seconds, for you, who is Jesus Christ?
I say he's the closest friend I'll ever have in my life. And I believe he is the model through the Gospels that I try to follow, not very successfully, but I try. And who loves me, even though I may not succeed all the time.
Marie, that's a very beautiful statement, and I thank you so much for being our guest on Christopher Close Up and for all the work you've done.